When you look around your organization today, it can feel like every team runs on a different cloud app. HR has one system, marketing has several, engineering lives in its own set of tools, and individuals sign up for whatever helps them move faster. Somewhere in the middle, you are expected to know what data sits in each of those services, who can touch it, and what happens when something goes wrong. That messy, overlapping reality is exactly where Software as a Service Security, SaaS security, lives, and it is the focus of this Tuesday Insights feature from Bare Metal Cyber Magazine.
Instead of thinking about racks of servers and network segments, SaaS security asks different questions. It asks which services your business relies on, what data each one holds, how people log in, and which vendors you have effectively trusted with key parts of your operation. It sits at the crossroads of identity, data protection, and vendor risk. The cloud provider runs the infrastructure, but you still decide who gets access, what they can do, and how carefully you watch for trouble.
A big part of the challenge comes from confusion about where the provider's responsibility ends and yours begins. With SaaS, the vendor usually handles patches, infrastructure hardening, and a set of built-in protections. What they do not manage is the way you assign admin rights, which integrations you enable, or how quickly you revoke access when someone leaves. Thinking the provider secures everything is one of the fastest ways to end up exposed, because the riskiest gaps often sit in those customer-controlled decisions rather than in the data center. If you want a simple way to picture the scope of SaaS security, imagine a few key dimensions. One is visibility, meaning you know which apps are in use and what they hold. Another is access, meaning logins, roles, and multi-factor prompts follow a pattern rather than being different for every tool. A third is data handling, which covers how information is stored, shared, exported, and backed up. There is also vendor posture, which is your view of how each provider protects your information, and configuration and monitoring, which is how you set safe defaults and watch for drift. In day-to-day work, SaaS security is less about one-time heroic cleanups and more about building repeatable flows. It begins with how new apps enter the environment. Some arrive through formal procurement processes with contracts and reviews, while others sneak in through free trials and credit cards. A mature approach creates a gentle funnel for both paths, so that discovery, basic risk checks, and go or no-go decisions happen steadily, instead of only during big projects or audits. Once an application is allowed, identity quickly becomes the main lever. Many organizations connect important SaaS platforms to a single sign-on system, so accounts and multi-factor prompts behave the same way across tools. When that works, joiner, mover, and leaver changes in your directory flow into SaaS access without someone remembering to click through multiple admin consoles. That reduces orphaned accounts and makes it easier to explain who can see what during incidents or compliance reviews.
Configuration and monitoring add the next layer. For each key application, someone defines what good looks like, which sharing settings are acceptable, which logging options must be turned on, how long data should live, and when alerts should fire. Event data then feeds into your existing monitoring stack, so analysts can spot suspicious logins, mass exports, or sudden changes to security settings. A simple example is your marketing platform. It gets discovered and approved, wired into single sign-on, configured with reasonable defaults around audience data and integrations, and then watched through the same lens you use for other high-value systems.
All of these flows depend on some big assumptions that are easy to miss. You need some way to discover apps that people already use, even if they never hit procurement. You need identity data that is clean and reflects real job changes, so access decisions make sense. You need clear ownership for configuration standards in your most important tools. You also need analysts and admins who understand what SaaS-specific alerts really mean, so they do not drown in noise or ignore subtle but serious signals. In real environments, SaaS security shows up as a series of practical moves rather than a grand design. One of the fastest wins is simply creating and maintaining a central list of SaaS apps, even if it starts in a humble spreadsheet. When each entry has at least a data sensitivity rating, a note about whether it uses single sign-on, and a name for the business owner, you instantly change how you respond to incidents and answer auditor questions. You move from guesswork to a concrete set of systems and people to engage.
Another common pattern is focusing tightly on a small set of high-value services. These are the platforms that hold customer records, payment information, financial data, or critical intellectual property. Teams often start by making sure those systems all use single sign-on and multi-factor authentication. Then they clean up overly broad roles and trim down sprawling admin lists. Over time, they add simple guardrails, like approval steps for new integrations, standardized permission sets for common job roles, and regular reviews of who still needs elevated rights.
As organizations mature, SaaS security starts to appear earlier in the lifecycle. Some teams create a defined onboarding path for new apps. That path might include quick checks on where data is stored, how the service logs activity, how it handles integrations, and how easily it connects to identity systems. Others bring in tools that watch for shadow SaaS based on network traffic or login activity, feeding those discoveries back into governance processes. Some extend their data loss prevention or classification rules into multiple SaaS platforms, so data handling feels consistent, even though the apps are different. When SaaS security is working well, you feel a balance between control and usability. People still get to use the tools that help them do their jobs, but those tools are visible, connected to central identity, and configured with thoughtful defaults. When a vendor announces a breach, you do not have to start from scratch. You can quickly see whether you use that service, what data it holds, and which business owners to involve. During normal weeks, you can answer questions about access and data residency without starting a detective story every time. There are real payoff moments in operations as well. Centralized access and automated provisioning reduce time spent on routine account work. When an incident happens, analysts can pivot from an indicator to a clear set of possibly affected SaaS systems and use known playbooks to contain and clean up. Over months and years, that consistency eases stress on your teams and keeps more energy available for complex or novel problems rather than endless one-off access fixes. Those gains do not come for free. Building a solid SaaS security program takes coordination across security, IT, procurement, legal, finance, and business leaders. Some steps, like tightening a few key configurations or enforcing multi-factor on high-risk apps, are cheap and fast. Others, such as deploying discovery tools, integrating more platforms with single sign-on, or aligning configuration standards with broader frameworks, may add cost and complexity. There is also a cultural cost when you slow down adoption of a popular new app long enough to perform basic checks. It is equally important to be honest about the limits of SaaS security. No amount of clean identity data or beautiful playbooks can fully make up for a provider that has weak internal security or minimal logging. You can reduce shadow SaaS by making good tools easy to use and giving people a safe path to request what they need, but you will not eliminate it. Marketing language sometimes suggests a single platform can solve SaaS risk. In reality, you are assembling a set of practices and tools that together reduce risk and make it more understandable, not erase it. Because the patterns are so common, the failure modes are also familiar. One is the inventory that gets built once and then quietly rots because nobody owns keeping it current. Another is partial single sign-on coverage, where some critical apps are connected while others remain scattered across local accounts and shared passwords. Long-standing admin accounts that never get reviewed, especially tied to former projects or contractors, are another recurring weakness. Shallow adoption has its own look and feel. You might see a new SaaS discovery or posture management tool rolled out, complete with slick dashboards and maps, but nothing about the approval process for new apps changes. Admin rights are still granted informally, and nobody updates incident playbooks to act on the insights that the tool reveals. In those cases, you have more information about risk, but have not changed the behaviors that actually drive outcomes. Healthy SaaS security is easier to recognize than it might seem. There is usually a named person or small group that owns the inventory and has a simple way to capture new apps and retire old ones. High-value services almost always use single sign-on and multi-factor authentication, and roles inside those apps map to real job functions, rather than being invented from scratch for every user. Admin rights are limited, checked regularly, and removed when no longer needed. Significant integrations and configuration changes follow a short but clear approval path, instead of endless email threads.
You can also look at a few concrete signals over time. Orphaned accounts in important SaaS platforms should drop as identity-driven provisioning takes hold. When someone asks where a certain type of data lives, it should be possible to answer without days of hunting. During vendor incidents, your teams should be able to estimate impact and take action without chaos. Analysts should describe SaaS alerts as fitting into their normal queues and playbooks rather than always requiring special handling. And business partners should start using terms like approved apps or sensitive data systems in their own planning conversations.
At its heart, SaaS security is about turning a loose collection of cloud tools into a managed, predictable part of your risk story. Instead of treating every new service as a special case, you create a simple, repeatable way to discover what people are using, decide whether the risk is acceptable, and keep access and configuration in line with how your organization actually works. It sits where identity, data, and vendor relationships meet, and it is especially good at answering questions about who can see which information through which paths.
You do not need a perfect design to move forward. If you start by improving visibility into the services you already rely on, tightening access and configuration on the few platforms that matter most, and giving someone real ownership of the SaaS inventory, you will already be ahead of many peers. From there, you can look at your cloud apps and ask whether they feel like a system you understand or a pile of exceptions waiting to surprise you. Each step toward the first answer is a step towards safer, calmer use of the tools your business depends on every day.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.